If you think you know what your children are capable of when money is involved, this story will shatter every belief you have about family loyalty. Stay until the end, because the betrayal you're about to witness will leave you questioning everything. Subscribe for more stories that expose the dark side of family greed. My name is Robert Williams. I'm 68 years old, and I thought I knew my sons. After working 45 years as a construction foreman in Denver, Colorado, I'd built what I believed was a loving, close-knit family. My wife, Margaret, passed away 3 years ago, leaving me alone in our modest ranch house with 2 sons I was proud of. Or so I thought. It was a cold February morning when the certified letter arrived. The return address read, Morrison and Associates, Estate Attorneys. My hands shook as I opened it. Not because I was afraid, but because I recognized the name. It was about my brother Frank's estate. Frank had been the family success story, the brother who'd moved to California, started a tech company, and became wealthy beyond our wildest dreams. We'd drifted apart over the years, but when he died 6 months ago, I'd attended his funeral in San Francisco. It was a simple service, and I assumed that was the end of it. But this letter was about to turn my world upside down. Dear Mr. Williams, it began, we regret to inform you that there has been a significant delay in processing your brother Franklin Williams's estate. We recently discovered assets that require immediate attention regarding the beneficiaries listed in his will. I sat down heavily in my recliner, the same chair where Margaret used to read her romance novels on Sunday afternoons. The letter continued. According to the will, your brother left his entire estate, valued at approximately $8 million, to be divided equally among his 3 nephews, your sons David and Michael Williams, and your cousin's son James Peterson in Texas. However, we have been unable to locate David and Michael Williams at the addresses provided. We need updated contact information immediately. The letter fell from my hands onto the carpet. $2.8 million. My sons were each entitled to nearly $1 million, and I had no idea. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what I discovered when I called my sons that afternoon. They already knew. What I learned next would reveal a betrayal so deep it would destroy the foundation of everything I believed about my family. I called David first. He was my eldest at 35, married to Lisa with 2 beautiful grandchildren I adored. He worked as an accountant downtown and had always been the responsible one. Dad, what's up? He answered on the second ring. David, I just received a letter about Uncle Frank's will. Did you know he left you and Michael money in his estate? There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable pause that made my stomach twist. Dad, we need to talk about this in person. No, David, we need to talk about this now. The letter says you and your brother are each entitled to nearly $1 million. The lawyers can't find you because they have old addresses. Why haven't you contacted them? Another pause. Dad, please come over tonight. Michael will be here too. We can explain everything. Explain what? What's to explain? You call the lawyers, update your information, and claim your inheritance. It's that simple. It's not that simple, Dad. Something in his tone chilled me to the bone. What do you mean it's not simple? Just, please come over at 7 tonight. We'll explain everything then. He hung up before I could respond. I sat staring at the phone, a growing sense of dread filling my chest. I immediately called Michael, my younger son at 32. He was the free spirit, the one who'd bounced between jobs, the charming one who could talk his way out of anything. Hey, Pops! Michael's voice was unusually bright, almost forced. Michael, I need to ask you something, and I want the truth. Did you know Uncle Frank left you money in his will? The silence was deafening. Michael, Dad, I'm heading over to David's house right now. Can we discuss this tonight? I'm not waiting until tonight. I want answers now. This lawyer has been trying to reach you boys for months. Dad, it's complicated. What's complicated about inheriting money? Michael's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Dad, please just come over tonight. There are things you don't understand. Then help me understand. But the line went dead. Both my sons had hung up on me. In 68 years of life, through raising them, through Margaret's illness, through every family crisis we'd faced, my sons had never hung up on me. I sat in my empty house, surrounded by 40 years of family photos, and for the first time since Margaret's funeral, I felt completely alone. That evening, when I walked into David's living room, I discovered a betrayal that would make me question everything I'd ever believed about the family I'd raised. David's house was unusually quiet when I arrived. The children were nowhere to be seen, which was strange, because my granddaughter Emma, age 8, always ran to hug me when I visited. The silence felt ominous. Both my sons sat at the dining table, papers spread out in front of them. Lisa, David's wife, was in the kitchen but kept glancing nervously toward us. Michael wouldn't make eye contact with me. "Sit down, Dad," David said, his voice heavy with something I couldn't identify. I pulled out a chair and sat across from them. "All right, boys, start talking. What's this all about?" David slid a stack of papers toward me. "Dad, 6 months ago, right after Uncle Frank's funeral, we were contacted by the estate lawyers." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because—" Michael finally looked up, and I was shocked to see guilt written all over his face. "Because we wanted to figure out how to handle this properly." I picked up the papers. They were legal documents, correspondence between my sons and the estate attorneys. The dates went back 6 months. Handle what properly? You inherit the money, you pay the taxes, you're done. David and Michael exchanged a look that made my blood run cold. "Dad," David said slowly, "there's something about Uncle Frank's will that's unusual." "Unusual how?" Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Uncle Frank didn't just leave us money, Dad. He left us specific instructions and conditions." What kind of conditions?" David pulled out another document, this one handwritten in Frank's familiar scrawl. "Uncle Frank wrote a letter explaining why he was leaving us the money. He said he knew that you'd spent your entire life taking care of everyone else and that you'd probably never accept help even if you needed it." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "What are you talking about?" "Dad, Uncle Frank knew about Mom's medical bills. He knew about the mortgage you took out on the house to pay for her treatments. He knew you were struggling financially." The words hit me like a physical blow. Margaret's cancer treatment had indeed cost us everything. I'd mortgaged our paid-off house, spent our retirement savings, maxed out credit cards, but I'd never told anyone, especially not Frank. How did he know that? Michael's voice was barely audible. "Because we told him." The room started spinning. "You told him what?" "Dad, 3 years ago, when Mum was getting sicker, David and I reached out to Uncle Frank. We asked him for help with the medical bills." I felt like I was drowning. "You went behind my back?" "We knew you'd never ask for help yourself," David said quickly. "Your pride. We knew you'd rather lose everything than ask for charity. So you humiliated me instead?" "It wasn't like that, Dad. Uncle Frank was family. He wanted to help. But he didn't help, did he? I lost the house, spent every penny we had, and you're telling me Uncle Frank knew about it the whole time?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. But what they revealed next would show me that the betrayal went deeper than I could have ever imagined. "Dad," Michael said, his voice shaking, "Uncle Frank did help." I stared at him, not understanding. "What do you mean he helped? I never received a dime from Frank." David reached into a folder and pulled out bank statements. "Dad, remember 3 years ago when you suddenly got that insurance settlement for $50,000? The one you thought was related to that old workplace injury?" My heart stopped beating. I remembered that money. It had appeared right when we needed it most, during Margaret's worst period of treatment. I'd questioned it at the time, but the insurance company had paperwork explaining it was for an old claim I'd filed years earlier. "That wasn't an insurance settlement," Michael whispered. "That was from Uncle Frank." The room tilted. "What?" "Uncle Frank sent the money, but he knew you'd never accept it as charity, so we arranged for it to look like an insurance payout." "We?" My voice came out as a croak. David couldn't meet my eyes. "Michael and I worked with Uncle Frank to make it believable. We forged the insurance documents, set up the whole story." I felt like I was having a heart attack. You forged..." "Dad, Please understand, we were trying to help you save Mom. By lying to me, by making me believe something that wasn't true, because we knew you'd refuse the money if you knew where it really came from. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. $50,000. Frank gave me $50,000, and you let me believe it was something I'd earned. Dad, you did earn it, Michael pleaded. You worked your whole life. You deserved that help. That's not your decision to make, I roared. That's not either of your decisions to make. Lisa appeared in the doorway, her face pale with worry. The children were probably upstairs, hearing their grandfather scream for the first time in their lives. There's more, Dad, David said quietly. More? More lies, more forged documents, more decisions you made about my life without telling me? The inheritance Uncle Frank left us. It comes with instructions. He wants us to use it to pay off your mortgage, set up a fund for your retirement, make sure you're taken care of. And let me guess, I said, my voice dripping with bitterness, you were planning to do this without telling me where the money came from. The silence was my answer. But what I discovered next would reveal the ultimate betrayal, one that would destroy my relationship with my sons forever. I sat back down heavily, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Tell me everything, every lie, every deception, every decision you made about my life behind my back. David and Michael looked at each other like two criminals about to confess to murder. Dad, David began, after Mom died, we started talking about your financial situation. You were proud, refused help, but we could see you were struggling. I was managing fine. Dad, you were eating soup for dinner every night. You hadn't bought new clothes in 2 years. Your truck was breaking down constantly. That was my choice. We know, Michael said, but we also knew Uncle Frank was getting older, and we thought if we stayed in touch with him, maybe when he passed he'd remember us in his will. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. You cultivated a relationship with my brother so you could inherit his money. It wasn't like that exactly. What was it like then, Michael? We genuinely cared about Uncle Frank. But yes, we also knew he was wealthy and had no children. We thought if we could inherit something, we could secretly take care of you. I felt sick. So the phone calls to Frank, the visits, the sudden interest in family connections after years of barely speaking to him. Dad, we did care about him, David insisted, but we also knew you needed help and would never accept it directly. And Frank knew this too? Uncle Frank thought it was noble that we were looking out for you, Michael said. He said it showed we were good sons. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Good sons who lie, forge documents, and manipulate their dying uncle. Dad, Uncle Frank was dying anyway. The money was just sitting there. He had no wife, no children. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop talking. I looked around David's beautiful house, the new furniture, the renovated kitchen, the children's expensive toys scattered around. How much of Uncle Frank's money have you already spent? Another uncomfortable silence. David, I asked you a question. Dad, technically we haven't received the inheritance yet because the lawyers couldn't locate us. But you've borrowed against it, haven't you? Michael's face went white. How did you? Because I'm not stupid. This house renovation, Michael's new truck, the private school tuition for the kids. You don't make enough money for all this. David's voice was barely audible. We took out loans using the expected inheritance as collateral. How much? Dad, how much? About $400,000 between both of us. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. But what I learned next would reveal that their betrayal had endangered not just our family's honor, but our entire future. $400,000. The number echoed in my head as I stared at my two sons, these men I'd raised to be honest, hard-working, honorable. They'd borrowed nearly half of their uncle's inheritance before they'd even received it. Dad, please let us explain, David said, panic creeping into his voice. Explain what? That you're both criminals? That you've committed fraud? It's not fraud, Michael protested. We're legitimate heirs. We just borrowed against money that's rightfully ours. Rightfully yours? I stood up again, pacing around the dining room. You manipulated a dying old man, forged insurance documents in my name, and took out massive loans based on money you haven't received yet. What part of that is rightful? Lisa finally spoke from the doorway. Mr. Williams, David was just trying to provide for his family by lying and cheating, by planning ahead, David said desperately. Dad, we knew the inheritance was coming. We knew Uncle Frank was sick. We just accelerated the timeline. Accelerated the timeline. I repeated the words slowly. Do you hear yourselves? You sound like con artists. Dad, we're not criminals, Michael said. We're your sons who wanted to take care of you. Take care of me? By lying to me for 3 years, by forging documents, by making me believe I'd earned money that was charity? I walked to the window and stared out at the snow-covered neighborhood. All these beautiful houses, all these successful families, and here I was discovering that my own sons were living a complete lie. What happens if the inheritance doesn't come through? I asked without turning around. Silence. David, I asked you a question. What happens if there are problems with Frank's estate? What happens if the lawyers discover you've already borrowed against money you don't legally possess yet? Dad, that won't happen. But what if it does? I turned to face them. What if Frank's will is contested? What if there are tax problems? What if the estate is tied up in court for years? The look of terror on both their faces told me they'd never considered these possibilities. We'd have to. David's voice trailed off. You'd have to what? We'd have to find another way to pay back the loans. With what money? David, you're an accountant making $60,000 a year. Michael, you change jobs every 6 months. How exactly would you pay back $400,000? Michael was starting to sweat. Dad, the inheritance will come through. It has to. It doesn't have to do anything. And when those loan payments start coming due, when the banks start calling, when the credit card companies start threatening foreclosure on your homes, what then? Dad, please, David begged. Don't make this worse than it is. I'm not making it worse. You made it worse when you decided to live beyond your means based on a dead man's money. And then I realized the most heartbreaking truth of all. One that would force me to make the most difficult decision of my life. I sat back down at the table, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. My sons watched me nervously, waiting for whatever came next. Boys, I said quietly, do you understand what you've done to me? Dad, we were trying to help. No, Michael. Do you understand what you've done to me as a man, as your father, as someone who raised you to have integrity? Neither of them answered. For 3 years I've been living on charity and didn't know it. For 3 years I thought I was managing on my own, maintaining my dignity, taking care of myself, but I was living on a lie you created. Dad, that $50,000 saved Mum's life, David said desperately. Maybe it did, but it also stole something from me that I can never get back. The truth about my own life. I picked up the forged insurance documents. Every time I looked at these papers, I felt proud. I felt like maybe the system worked. Maybe all those years of honest labor had finally paid off, but it was all fake. The money was real, Michael insisted. Uncle Frank genuinely wanted to help, but my knowledge of where it came from wasn't real. My consent wasn't real. My choice in the matter wasn't real. I stood up and walked to the family photos on David's mantel. Pictures of birthdays, graduations, family vacations, all the moments that had seemed so genuine. How much of our relationship has been lies, I asked, still facing the photos. Dad, what do you mean? The phone calls asking how I'm doing, the visits, the concern about my health, my finances, my well-being. How much of that was genuine worry and how much was guilt management? Dad, we love you, David said, his voice breaking. I know you do. But you also pitied me. You saw me as a pathetic old man who needed to be managed and manipulated for his own good. I turned back to them. Do you know what hurts the most? It's not the lies about the insurance money. It's not even the manipulation of Frank. It's that you never believed I was strong enough to handle the truth. Dad, you never believed I was man enough to accept help with dignity. You never believed I was wise enough to make my own decisions about my own life. You treated me like a child who needed to be protected from reality. Michael was crying now. Dad, we just wanted to take care of you, like you took care of us. But that's not how you take care of someone, son. You take care of someone by respecting them enough to tell them the truth and let them choose. I walked back to the table and gathered up all the papers, the legal documents, the bank statements, the forged insurance papers. What are you doing? David asked. I'm taking these to the estate lawyers tomorrow. Dad, no, please. I'm going to tell them everything. The loans you've taken, the manipulation of Frank, the forged documents, everything. Dad, you'll destroy us, Michael pleaded. I looked at my two sons and spoke the words that would change our family forever. I looked at my sons, really looked at them. David with his expensive suit and guilty eyes, Michael with his trendy haircut and trembling hands. These were the boys I'd taught to ride bikes, helped with homework, walked to school every morning for years. Dad, please, David whispered. If you tell the lawyers what we did, we could go to prison. Prison. The word hit me like a physical blow. Loan fraud, document forgery, potentially elder abuse charges for manipulating Uncle Frank, Michael said, his voice hollow. Dad, our lives will be over. Our children will grow up without fathers. I felt the weight of the decision crushing down on me. On one side, my moral obligation to expose their crimes. On the other, my love for my sons and grandchildren. Dad, David continued, we know we made mistakes. Huge mistakes, but we can fix this, we can make it right. How? I asked. How do you make fraud and forgery right? We contact the lawyers, claim the inheritance legitimately, pay off the loans, and never lie to you again, Michael said quickly. And what about the next time you think you know what's best for me? What about the next time you decide I can't handle the truth? There won't be a next time, David promised. How can I believe that? How can I ever trust either of you again? Lisa stepped forward from the kitchen. Mr. Williams, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But David is a good father to your grandchildren. Please don't destroy their lives because of his mistakes. I'm not destroying anything, Lisa. Their choices destroyed things. I walked to the window again, staring out at the quiet suburban street. Somewhere in this neighborhood there were other families dealing with their own secrets, their own betrayals, but I felt completely alone. Dad, Michael said softly, what would Mom want you to do? The mention of Margaret hit me like a knife to the chest. Don't you dare bring your mother into this. Dad, Mom would want our family to stay together. She'd want us to forgive each other and move forward. Your mother would want you to face the consequences of your actions like men. Dad, please, David begged. We'll do anything. We'll pay you back every penny of that $50,000. We'll put you in charge of the inheritance when it comes through. We'll never make another decision about your life without asking you first. I turned back to them. And what about the loans? What about the $400,000 you've already spent? We'll figure it out, Michael said desperately. We'll sell our houses, downsize, whatever it takes. With what? You're both already leveraged to the hilt. You can't sell houses that are mortgaged beyond their value. The reality was settling in for all of us. My sons had built their lives on a foundation of borrowed money and lies. One phone call from me to the estate lawyers would bring it all crashing down, but it would also destroy my grandchildren's lives, possibly send their fathers to prison and tear apart what was left of our family. As I stood there, holding the power to either save or destroy my sons, I realized I had to make a choice that would define the rest of our lives. I sat down heavily in David's expensive leather chair, another purchase made with borrowed money. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was sitting on furniture bought with debt, secured against a dead man's fortune. Dad, David said quietly, what are you going to do? I looked at the papers in my hands. Legal documents, bank statements, forged insurance papers, evidence of crimes that could send my sons to prison. I don't know, I admitted. Dad, we know we messed up, Michael said, but everything we did because we love you. Love doesn't justify fraud, Michael. No, it doesn't. But maybe love can justify forgiveness. I thought about Margaret, about what she would really want. Not the sanitized version my sons were imagining, but the real Margaret who believed in consequences and responsibility. "If I don't report this to the lawyers," I said slowly, "what guarantees do I have that you'll change?" "You have our word," David said immediately. I almost laughed. "Your word? The same word that guaranteed you'd never lie to me? The same word that promised you were just looking out for my best interests?" "Dad, we'll prove it to you," Michael insisted. "We'll be completely transparent about everything from now on." "Starting with what?" David and Michael exchanged glances. Starting with the fact that we may have underestimated how much we've borrowed." My heart sank. "How much?" "When we factor in the interest, the credit cards we maxed out, the second mortgages, it's closer to $600,000. I felt dizzy. $600,000? That's more than the entire inheritance after taxes. "Dad, we thought the investments would pay off." "What investments?" Michael's voice was barely audible. "We didn't just borrow money for houses and cars. We invested some of it in Michael's friend's business venture." "What business venture?" "A restaurant chain. It was supposed to be a sure thing. And it failed. We lost about $200,000. I put my head in my hands. My sons hadn't just committed fraud. They'd been incredibly stupid about it. "So let me understand this," I said without looking up. "You manipulated your dying uncle, forged documents in my name, borrowed $600,000 against money you didn't have yet, and then lost a third of it in a failed restaurant chain. Dad, and now you want me to keep quiet about all of this so you can inherit money that won't even cover what you owe." "Dad, Uncle Frank's estate is worth $2.8 million. Even after taxes, we'd each get about $800,000. Which means you'd barely break even after paying back your debts. But we would break even, and you'd get the money Uncle Frank wanted you to have for your retirement." I finally looked up at my sons. "What money for my retirement?" "Dad, Uncle Frank's instructions were clear. He wanted us to use part of our inheritance to set up a retirement fund for you, pay off your mortgage, make sure you're comfortable." "How much?" "About $300,000 total." So there it was. The complete picture. My sons had committed multiple felonies, destroyed their financial futures, and endangered their family's security, all in the name of getting me money I'd never asked for and didn't know I needed. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where my grandchildren's swing set sat covered in snow. Emma and little Bobby had played on that swing set just last weekend, laughing and calling for Grandpa to push them higher. Those children were innocent in all of this. They didn't deserve to have their lives destroyed because their fathers were criminals and fools. But I also thought about Frank, my brother who'd worked his entire life to build something meaningful, only to have it manipulated and squandered by family members he'd trusted. "Dad?" David's voice was barely audible. "What are you going to do?" I turned back to face my sons. "I'm going to make you a deal, but it's not negotiable." Both of them leaned forward eagerly. "First, you're going to contact the estate lawyers tomorrow and provide them with your current addresses and information. You're going to claim the inheritance legitimately." "Okay, yes, we can do that," Michael said quickly. "Second, you're going to use every penny of that inheritance to pay back the loans you took fraudulently. Every penny. I don't care if it means you have to sell your houses and move into apartments." David's face fell. "Dad, that would leave us with almost nothing." "That's exactly right. You'll have nothing except what you can earn honestly." "But what about your retirement fund? What about paying off your mortgage like Uncle Frank wanted?" "I'll take care of my own retirement and my own mortgage, the same way I've taken care of everything else in my life, through honest work and careful savings." "Dad, you can't work construction forever at your age." "I'll work as long as I can, and when I can't, I'll figure something else out, but I won't live on money obtained through fraud." I walked back to the table and picked up the forged insurance documents. "Third, you're going to contact whoever helped you create these fake insurance papers, and you're going to confess what you did." I don't care if it means you have to pay back that $50,000 too. Dad, that was 3 years ago. I don't care if it was 30 years ago. A crime doesn't become less of a crime because time passes. But Dad, if we have to pay back the $50,000 too, plus the loan debts, we'll be financially ruined. Yes, you will be. And that's exactly what should happen when you commit fraud. I sat back down and looked at both my sons. Here's the deal, boys. You do exactly what I've told you. You confess your crimes and pay back every penny you stole or borrowed fraudulently. And I'll keep quiet about what you did to Frank. Your children won't have to visit you in prison, and Lisa and whatever woman Michael is dating this month won't have to explain why their partners are criminals. And if we don't agree, David asked quietly, then I call the estate lawyers in the morning and tell them everything. I call the FBI fraud division, I call the district attorney, and I let the justice system decide what happens to you. Michael was crying now. Dad, this will destroy our lives. No, Michael. You destroyed your own lives when you decided to become criminals. I'm offering you a chance to rebuild them honestly. I stood up and gathered the papers one final time. You have 24 hours to decide. Tomorrow at this time, either you've contacted the estate lawyers and started the process of making this right, or I have. I walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. You know what breaks my heart the most? It's not that you lied to me, or stole money, or manipulated Frank. It's that you never believed I was strong enough to live with dignity in poverty. You never believed I was man enough to accept the consequences of my own financial choices. Dad, we just wanted to help. No, you wanted to control. You wanted to manage me like I was incompetent. And in doing that, you became the kind of men I never raised you to be. I opened the door and stepped into the cold Colorado night. Dad, David called after me, we love you. I turned back one last time. I love you too, boys. That's why I'm giving you this chance to become the men your mother and I thought we'd raised. I drove home through the snowy streets to my small, mortgage-heavy house. It wasn't much, but it was honest. It was built on 45 years of real work, real sweat, real integrity. The next evening, David called. Dad, we contacted the lawyers. We're claiming the inheritance and we'll use it to pay back the loans. All of them? Every penny. And the insurance fraud. We'll confess that too. 3 months later, my sons were financially ruined, but no longer criminals. They'd sold their big houses and moved into small apartments. The grandchildren had to change schools. Lisa left David, unable to handle the shame and financial stress. But my sons were free men. They were working honest jobs and slowly rebuilding their lives without lies. Frank's money was gone, used to pay back debts and correct wrongs. I never saw a penny of it, and I never wanted to, because I learned something important in those terrible months. A man's dignity isn't measured by how much money he has, but by how honestly he earned it. And that's a lesson worth more than any inheritance. This story shows us that sometimes the greatest betrayal comes not from malice, but from the arrogance of thinking we know what's best for someone else. Family love without respect becomes manipulation. If this story made you think about the relationships in your own life, share it with someone who needs to remember that honesty is always more valuable than money. Subscribe for more stories that explore the complex truths about family, money, and integrity.